Hey, good evening, ladies and gentle drunks. My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Lovely to have you all here. I want to welcome you all to the fourth dimension. Big book study, that is. Grateful you guys are all here. I know I'm certainly grateful I'm here. And I love sharing this stuff with you. And I look forward to going through what we're going to go through tonight. But before we begin, let's kick off as we always do with a set-aside prayer. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, about the 12 steps, and please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. And as this is the fourth dimension big book study, I always like to read the two parts of our book that refer to the fourth dimension. So first, on page 8, Bill Wilson writes that I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And then on page 25, Bill Wilson writes that we have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. All right. We're going to be catapulted. We're going to be rocketed. And for everyone who will, for the sake of custom and tradition at the fourth dimension big book study, everybody please put one hand up like this. And everybody put another hand up like this. And everybody go, oh, yeah. All right, ladies and gentle drunks, let's get into it. One of the things I want to remind everybody about is that all of these are being recorded by the wonderful Mr. Rob. And so all of these are on YouTube. Okay. So if you ever, are thinking about step 4 or miss something from last week or so on, don't be afraid. Go onto YouTube, go back. You can listen to it. You can scrub and fast forward right to the part that you're trying to, remember about and whatnot. And it's all there. That said, I am going to do a little bit of review. Oh, just a little bit of review tonight.
Hey, Kevin, if you go, your background is blurred, but if you go where your video camera is and click on the little arrow up, there's a blur my background button. And I think you have that turned on and the whiteboard looks a little bit blurry. Oh no, never mind. It was good the other way. Never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry that the hopefully you guys will be able to see.
You can read it. I just thought it was a little bit blurry, so I was wrong. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's already it's just blurry just in general. I need to work on my audio visual skills, but hopefully this will be okay. And as Brad indicated last week as well, guys, you can pin my particular square or cube or whatever you want to call it, my Zoom tile, I guess maybe is what they call it. You can pin that and enlarge it, and hopefully you'll be able to read this stuff a little bit better. Okay, well, so just to reinforce something that we talk about in this study all the time, one of the basic, most foundational things of this entire study is the transition that I needed to make as an alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous. I needed to make a transition from being a taker to being a giver, okay? And the way that I make that transition is by doing the 12 steps. That's how I become a receiver, and then ultimately I get to become a giver, okay? So we're making this transition from being takers to being givers. And part of the reason I mention that is because I think it's really important. I know we all like to, log in on Tuesday evenings and kind of sit back and watch the fourth dimension big book study show. Okay, but always be mindful, guys, of the transition of moving from being takers to being givers. What I hope, my hope in my heart, is that you guys are taking this information and you're learning it and applying it in your own lives. And then I would say just as important, if not more importantly, than taking that information, going out and finding newcomers, finding sponsees, and taking them through this work. because this work is absolutely transformational. Just being in AA and just going to meetings, trying to survive on meeting-based sobriety, trying to stay sober by being what I call a recovery vampire, which is I would just go to meetings and just try to sponge off of your recovery, trying to get sober off the recovery that other people had as a result of doing this work, did not work for me. It might feel good while I was sitting in the meeting for a small period of time, but eventually I would leave that meeting, I would go home, and untreated alcoholism would creep back into my life. I would have an insane thought. I would become restless, irritable, and discontent. I would have an insane thought that told me taking a drink would be a good idea. I'd take that drink, trigger the allergy, and I'm gone again. You know, I love what Bill Wilson says about step 1. In the 12 and 12, he calls it a double-edged sword. A double-edged sword. He says, the tyrant alcohol wielded a double-edged sword over us. First, we were smitten by an insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking, and then by an allergy of the body that ensured we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process. I love that. I just read that the other day, and I hadn't read it for a long time. I really love the way he talks about that. So tonight we're going to continue on in step 4. Okay. And I always like to point out when we're doing this work, why are we doing this? Why are we going through step 4? Okay. Well, it's to clear away the things within me that are blocking me from God, essentially. Okay. It's to clear away from within me the common manifestations of self. Okay. We've learned that selfishness and self-centeredness are the root of our trouble. In AA, we learned that on page 62. One of the most important parts in our book in terms of my understanding of alcoholism and how spiritual sickness manifests itself in my life. Spiritual sickness manifests itself in my life as selfishness and self-centeredness. Okay. When I am spiritually sick, there's an easy way to know. Okay. Because I am being selfish and I am being self-centered. Okay. And so, you know, the book says in step 3, the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, right? Isn't that what it says? That's only half of the statement. The full statement says, the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Okay? We missed that second part, don't we? Though he usually doesn't think so. I didn't think so. I thought I was a pretty good guy. I thought it was pretty much all your fault. Okay? If you would have, and you didn't understand, if you had the life I lived and you had the people in your life and oh, the suffering and the trauma that I went through and all that stuff, you too would live the way that I live and you too would have these problems and you too would drink. In fact, my story is so sad that you ought to buy me a drink. Okay. I had no problem. Man, I'd sit at the wet end of a bar and admit to people I was an alcoholic if I thought that they would buy me a drink. And then listen to my, you know, terrible little bedtime story, you know, this ongoing saga of Kevin's life. I needed to get down to reality. Okay. One of the ways I love thinking about step 4, one of my first sponsors told me that step 4 is like, it's like looking in a washing machine or a dryer, you know, that's on spin cycle. Okay. And it's spinning around and around. Okay, and we're looking in there and we're trying to see all the stuff that's in there. We're trying to make sense out of it. And that's how it looks in my head prior to step 4. And what I'm doing in a step 4 really is stopping and opening that dryer up, taking it all out and laying it all out so I can see exactly what is really in there. Okay. And it's not easy. It's hard to do. Certainly it can be scary. It can be uncomfortable, certainly to do this work, but certainly not as uncomfortable as the alternative. Okay, to live life on a spiritual basis, to live life, yeah, and then exactly right. And then in step 5, I invite my sponsor over to tell me what he or she really sees in there. The only thing that ever made me honest, open-minded, and willing enough to actually go through this work in the way that it needs to be done is pain. Pain. Just good old-fashioned alcoholic pain and suffering. hurting anyone I ever loved and destroying everything I ever cared about, and the guilt and the shame that I felt about that, and the self-hatred and the self-loathing and all of that stuff, the pain of that. And you know, what our book says is our decision, step 3, was a vital and crucial step. It could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves that were blocking us. Okay? Blocking us from what? Blocking us from the power that's going to save our lives. And that line, permanent effect, I really highlight that to my sponsees, because a lot of guys that I sponsor, it's just the way it is. A lot of people have been flailing around Alcoholics Anonymous for years, telling themselves the same lie that I told myself. I've been to AA and it didn't work. And that's not the case. Sitting around in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous alone and just going to meetings is not recovery from alcoholism. Okay? The solution for the disease of alcoholism is to get connected to a power greater than myself of my own understanding that I access through working all of these steps. Okay? And so last week we dug in, we were looking, remember, in step 4 at the 3 common manifestations of self. Okay, that's what our book says. Being convinced that self is what it had defeated us. In fact, let's go to the book. Let's go to the book. So let's go to page 64. And Brad, are you available to read for us tonight?
I sure am. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, fella. Let's start on therefore. Let's start there.
Hey, everybody. I'm Brad Soloto, recovered alcoholic.
Hey,
Page
Brad.
64. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations.
Okay, perfect. So we talked about the fact that there's 3 common manifestations of self in a step 4 that we look at. Okay, number 1, we're going to look at resentment. We've been working on that the last couple of weeks. Tonight, we're going to talk about fear. And next week, we're going to talk about sex conduct. And we'll get into step 5 next week as well. Okay, but the 3 common manifestations of self that we look at in a step 4, according to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, are 3 things. We're going to talk about resentment. We're going to look at our resentments. We're going to look at fears, and we're going to look at our sex conduct. Okay, and those are the things that we look at in a step 4 according to Alcoholics Anonymous. There are many types of inventories that one can take. There are all kinds of books out there. There are all kinds of different types of inventories that people like to take. And those are all good, great, and fun. But there is only one step 4. Okay, and I'm clear about that. If I want to do step 4, I have to take the directions and the actions of step 4 directly out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what we're going to do together tonight. Okay, we're going to continue on. And tonight we're going to look at the 2nd common manifestation of self. And we're going to look at fear tonight. Okay. But just by way of just a little bit of review, we're going to quickly go through this 4-column inventory that we do. Remember, we've got a coil ring binder here. Okay, we've got a pen. Somebody told me, I just love this. It was actually Brad's friend from Buffalo, Shane, told us that his group, when they do step 3, they do step 3 together as a group as we do. But when they're done, they all have pens and they all throw pens at the guy who just did his step 3. And I just love that, because I think that there is a definitive way to know when I am done step 3. And that is because I have a pen and a piece of paper in my hand and I'm starting to do inventory. Okay. And on that note, I think we're going to get some PPG, some primary purpose group pens made. And when someone does step 3, we'll give them a PPG pen, okay? So the first thing we're gonna
Black
do
pen.
is say again?
Black pens, because we put it down in black and white.
In black and white, baby, that's right. Okay,
Black pens.
so we're gonna make these lines in our notebook, okay?
Bit of
Column
an
1, 2, column 3, and column 4, okay? Column 1, this is just for resentment, guys. We're gonna go through this very quickly. Column 1, who am I angry at? We listed people, principles, or institutions with whom we were angry, okay? Column 1. Column 2, why am I angry? Okay, we talked about these are very quick bullet points. On page 65, you never see them use more than 19 words to describe why we're angry. Very quick bullet points. Number 3, does it affect my self-esteem? Does it affect my security? There's 3 types of security we talk about. Does it affect my physical security, my emotional security, my financial security? Does it impact my ambition? Does it impact my personal relationships? Does it impact my sexual relationships? Okay, so that's what we look at in column 3. Between column 3 and column 4, we pray. We pray for the people that we resent, okay? We ask God to show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick or suffering man. You guys remember we talked about that last week. Okay, the importance of recognizing that the people that have harmed us are suffering like ourselves. Okay, and their suffering, they may not even want to harm us, but their suffering is spilling out of them and causing us to suffer. We are not even the first victims of their suffering. They are the first victims of their own suffering. And when we look at the world that way, when I look at these people that way, I begin to feel some level of understanding and compassion. So the prayers that we read are on page 67 and page 552. Then we go into column 4. Column 4, we look at the question, where am I to blame in terms of these resentments? Okay, so number 1, where am I to blame in the past? What decisions based on self did I make that put me in this position to be hurt? In what ways did I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliated, seemingly without provocation? Which means I was just standing there minding my own business and they came up and did this horrible thing to me. But we invariably find that we have made decisions at some time in the past, we made decisions based on self that put us in this position to be hurt, okay? So we look at where in the past, what have I done in the past that put me in this position to be hurt, okay? Though we did not like their symptoms, but the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick and suffering. We put ourselves in this position to be hurt, okay? Number 2, we're going to look in the mirror, which is to say the thing that I am judging or accusing this person of, the reason that I resent them, what they have done, am I guilty of or am I capable of doing the exact same thing, okay? And in looking at things that way, we begin to feel compassion for this person, okay? And none of this, guys, by the way, changes any of these situations. It does not change what happened. We can't change what happened. What I can change is the way I look at what happened. When I change the way that I look at things, the things that I look at change, okay? And we talked about Chuck Chamberlain, great, one of the early founders of AA in Southern California, wrote a book called A New Pair of Glasses, right? Because really, in his estimation, one of the most important turning points for us as members of Alcoholics Anonymous is this change of perception. Okay, my sponsor, Clancy, talks about alcoholism being a change of perception. Okay, a disease of perception. I needed to change my perception. Okay, and prior to coming to AA and prior to going through this work, what tool did I use? What did I have to change my perception instantly? Instantly, yeah, vodka. Okay, vodka, Jack Daniels, and God knows what other non-conference approved dry goods we might get into to change our perception. That's what changes our perception. Here, I'm simply asking myself the question, this person, I'm resentful, they stole from me. Have I ever stolen from anyone? Well, this person lied to me. Have I ever lied to anyone? This person, cheated on me. Have I ever cheated, or am I capable of cheating on someone? Okay, and I need to look at that and get honest about it. And then I begin to develop some level of compassion. We talked about the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Sympathy is I feel sorry for you. Not a lot of spiritual value in that. Empathy is I can feel what you're feeling. There's a little bit more spiritual value in that. But compassion is we are the same. Okay. And when I can begin to develop some sense that we are the same, there is a sense of real spiritual forgiveness that can come from that. Okay. And remember, we talked about forgiveness does not mean condoning what the person did. It just means I'm going to let it go and I'm not going to hold on to it anymore. Okay. Forgiving someone means accepting the apology that is never going to come. Okay. There's never going to be an apology, but I accept their apology anyway. That's forgiveness. Okay. And then we talked about today. And where am I to blame in this resentment today? Which is to say, to what extent am I using this resentment as an excuse for my ongoing terrible behavior? Okay. In what ways am I blaming people that have harmed me as a reason, an excuse for me to go out and get loaded again, or just behave terribly? Okay. In what way am I justifying and rationalizing me continuing to drink, continuing to use, or continuing to harm people based on this sense of blaming people in my past, and I'm using that resentment today to continue my behavior? Okay. And a lot of people have talked to me about this since last week when we went through that. It's a very, very powerful thing when we start to get honest with ourselves about it. That I used, and in a sense, I mean, we talked about abuse, we talked about childhood abuse and so on. I know that really touched a lot of people. The reality is, guys, as a survivor myself of childhood abuse, I did far more abuse to myself over the many, many years that I was drinking and using that childhood abuse as fuel, okay, for my ongoing behavior. I became my own abuser, okay? I was the one harming myself, okay? I remember my father saying one time to me, Kevin, if another human being was doing to you what you were doing to yourself, I would gladly have taken a gun and shot him and went to jail for murder. Gladly. But I couldn't do that because you were the one doing it to yourself. So who's really to blame there? Okay. Our book says our problems are of our own making. And what we begin to develop here, okay, is a new way of looking at the world, a new sense of looking at the world, in a word that grown-ups like to use a lot. We don't hear it a lot in AA, but grown-ups love to use this word. It's called reality. All right. The reality of my life and the reality of these situations. Okay. And I begin to see and change my perception of the world. So with that said, guys, that was just a quick refresh on resentments. Now we're going to talk about the next common manifestation of self. We're all, guys, we're going to be on page 67. And the last paragraph there, you might want to make a note of this when you're working with your sponsees. This is where fear inventory begins in the big book. Last paragraph, page 67, notice the word fear. So this is the second common manifestation of self that we're going to look at. Brad, over to you.
Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse.
There, and what you may not realize is that we just read the first 3 columns of step 4. Okay. It's pretty simple. Okay. First thing it says, the first direction is we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment and connection with them. Okay. So that's number one. The first thing I'm going to do, again, in column 1, is I'm just going to list, what am I afraid of? Okay. Well, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. And that can be a very confusing question. To this day, it can be a confusing question. Okay. When I first came to AA, man, I didn't think I had any fears. And I don't say that to, you know, as though I was some like macho dude or anything like that. I just didn't understand fear. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I thought they were talking about, you know, phobias, like, you know, fear of flying or fear of tall buildings or, you know, fear of snakes or whatnot. And it wasn't until somebody outlined 2 words and put them together that I began to understand fear. And those 2 words are, well, 3 in a sense: self-centered, self-centered, one word, fear, self-centered fear. Okay. And when I began to hear that, and I began to understand that they were talking about this all-pervasive, erosive terror that I've had my entire life, this obsession with what other people are thinking about me, what's going to happen to me, and what's going on with me, and so on and so on and so on. That obsession is the type of fear that we're talking about. Okay. And so really, guys, there's 3 fears that a person can have. And I want you to listen to all 3 of these. And then I want you to see if you can tease out what is the commonality, what's the common thread in all of these fears. Okay. Number 1, I'm afraid I'm going to lose something that I have. Makes sense, right? We all know that fear. It could be money, it could be family, it could be, you know, reputation. I'm afraid I'm going to lose something I have. Number 1. Number 2, I'm afraid I'm not going to get something that I want. Okay. So we live in that fear. I'm maybe working hard and I'm not going to get what I want, or I'm in this relationship and they don't love me as much as I love them, I feel, or whatever it might be. Okay. I'm not going to get something that I want. Number 3, I've done something that I shouldn't have done and I'm going to get caught or exposed. Okay. So again, I'm afraid I'm going to lose something I have. Number 2, I'm afraid I'm not going to get something I want. And number 3, I've done something I shouldn't have done and I'm going to get caught and exposed. Can anybody tell me, can anybody see, relative to the idea of self-centered fear, what is the common trait between all of those fears? I'm afraid that I'm not going to get what I want. I'm afraid that I'm going to lose something that I have. Okay? That's it. Very, very rarely am I afraid of what's going to happen to you. Okay? Very rarely are my fears about other people. Okay? Little by little, as God's grace has come into my life and I have become more concerned with the well-being of others than I am myself, there are some moments where I am afraid for what's going to happen to other people. Primarily, though, this little disaster factory in my head, the catastrophe factory, is just obsessed with me and what's going to happen to me and what am I going to lose and how am I going to get hurt and so on and so on and so on. This obsession that we have with our own fears. Okay, another way to think about fear is what am I worried about? What's worrying me? Worry is another way to think about fear. What am I worried about? What's worrying me? Okay. And so we need to start to be able to recognize these things, and it's not easy. Self-centered fear, Bill Wilson says that self-centered fear is the chief activator of our defects of character. Okay. Self-centered fear. Me sitting at home alone, afraid about what's going to happen to me. All of our defects of character come from that, according to Bill Wilson. And so one of the things that we learn to do over time, and we'll talk about this more when we get to step 6 and 7, but I needed to be able to begin to develop some level of awareness when I get what Bill Wilson calls tangled up. When we get tangled up going through the day, to be able to stop and pause and ask myself, what is wrong with me right now? Why am I feeling this way? And be able to say, oh, man, I'm afraid right now. Of what? Man, I don't even really know, but I need to take a look at that. And another way to think about it is just what's worrying me? What am I worried about? Okay. And then start to do some inventory on it. Now, just like we did with resentment, if you Google the words resentment, step 4 resentment prompt, that word PROMPT, you'll get a sheet that gives us just some things to kind of benchmark off of resentments that we might have. It's the same with step 4 fear prompt. If you put that into the Google machine, you will get, okay, and I imagine our man Rob right now is diligently posting one up for us, where we can go in and take a look at what are all the different types of fears that we might have, okay? So that's what we do in column 1. Column 1, what am I afraid of? Okay, and we'll do some examples of these, but things, guys, like some of the big ones that are almost on every step 5 I've ever heard and every step 5 I've ever done. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear that nobody likes me, fear of getting sick, fear of not being good enough, fear of being humiliated, fear of losing my reputation, okay, and on and on. And once you start to like really flex that muscle a lot and get those reps in, you can start to really list a lot of fears. And again, guys, just like with resentments, it's exactly the same, 1 fear per page, okay? We're not listing all of our fears out here. It's 1 fear per page. What am I afraid of, okay? And they can be all kinds of things. I'm afraid of getting fat. I'm afraid of that I'm gonna have to pay a lot of taxes. Whatever your fears are, okay? One of my fears in early sobriety for many, many, many years was I was afraid of going bald. That was my number 1 fear. I'm afraid of going bald. Well, guess what? Anyway, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay, so that's number 1. What am I afraid of? Okay, column 2. The next line, it says, we asked ourselves why we had them. Okay, that's it. In column 2, that's it. Okay, and there's no really right or wrong way to do this. We're just going to ask ourselves, what are we afraid of? Column 2, why? Why do I have the fear? Okay, why am I afraid of this? Okay, and so that's what we're going to do. Column 1, we'll say I'm afraid of abandonment. Okay, column 2, why am I afraid of abandonment? Well, because I've been abandoned in the past, maybe, and because it hurts, and I feel like I'm going to be alone forever. Great. Boom. That's it. That's all we're going to write down. Then we're going to move into column 3. Okay. Say the fear was I'm afraid of my parents dying. Okay, that's a very real one for me. I'm a middle-aged only child. My parents are getting older, and they're going to pass sooner. God forbid, like not for many years, but it could happen. It's a deep fear of mine. Okay, so column 2, why am I afraid of that? Well, it's going to hurt, and I'm going to be lonely and alone. I feel, and don't know how I'll cope, without them, and so on and so forth. So we just write that down. Okay, and why are we doing this? It's because these fears, when I'm living in these fears, I am cut off from God. Okay, I'm obsessed with my own self-centered fears. And these things are cutting me off from the power of God. And I need the power of God in my life. God, as I understand him, higher power, creator, whatever we want to call him, I need to be connected to that power in order to stay sober. Okay? I need to be connected to that power in the maximum amount that I possibly can to ensure that I never have to drink again, that I'm never going to relapse. Okay? So this is what we do. Column 1. What am I afraid of? Column 2, why am I afraid? Column 3, then it asks, why do we have these fears? Why do we have these fears in column 2? Column 3, it says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Okay? If anybody ever asks you the question, why do we have fears? That's the answer. We have fears because self-reliance fails us, okay? So that's column 3. How has self-reliance failed me? I'm going to explain all this, and then we're going to go through some examples, guys, and I'll show you how this works. How has self-reliance failed me in terms of these fears? Okay, well, what does that mean? What do you mean self-reliance has failed me, Kevin? What does that mean? Well, look, guys, this is how I think about it. If I'm relying on myself and not on God and not on Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'm on my own trying to rely on myself, what's the first thing that's going to happen? I'm going to get drunk and I'm going to get loaded and I'm going to be on drugs and I'm going to be selfish and self-centered and I'm going to be a taker. I'm going to be a user. I'm going to be dishonest, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So what I want to do, guys, is take the most drunken, drug addicted, sick, selfish version of Kevin that I could ever imagine and look at the fear through the lens of that guy. Okay. If that guy relying on self comes back, how does that relate to this fear that we might have? So if it's a fear of abandonment, how does me being that guy relate to my fear of abandonment? If I'm afraid of being financially insecure, how does me being that guy relate to my fear of financial insecurity? Okay. And I know that may not make sense just yet. I promise you guys, we're going to go through some examples. And once you learn this tool, you're going to see how powerful it is and how easy it is to start applying all the time, okay? So those are the first 3 columns. Number 1, what am I afraid of? Number 2, why am I afraid? Why do I have this fear? Column 3, how is self-reliance failing me in terms of this fear? The most drunken, drug-addicted, sick, selfish, dishonest, spiritually sick version of Kevin. And how does that relate to whatever the fear might be? Okay. And just hang, if this isn't making sense yet, guys, just hang with me and we're going to do some examples. You guys will throw fears out to me and we'll put them through the test. We'll put them through all 4 columns. Okay. Okay, Brad, back to you. Let's get back in the book. Let's see what the solution is now. Let's see what the solution is for these fears.
Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear.
Okay, guys, that's it. That's everything about fear in the book. Okay. And that is the solution. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. Okay. So let's unpack that a little bit. Before we do though, guys, just as we did with resentments, there is a prayer that we say in between column 3 when I'm relying on self and when we get to column 4. Okay, and I'll share with you what column 4 is in just a minute. So we just read the prayer in the 3rd paragraph on page 68, right at the end. Remember, in the book, anytime it says we ask him, that's a prayer. Okay, and so this is the step 4 fear prayer. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention towards what he would have us be. Okay. So that's what I do, guys. And look, when we talk again about like a spiritual toolkit, that I don't leave home without it, man. I don't leave home without these prayers, okay? Does anybody remember last week we talked about the step 4 anger prayer and we talked about the short form of the step 4 anger prayer? Does anybody remember what it is? Anybody want to unmute yourselves and just the short form of that prayer? Anybody recall? Well, I know you all know it, but but
Is
some of you were
it
shy.
God help me?
Well, that's close, Karen. The short form of the step 4 anger prayer. I appreciate you you
God save me
participating.
from being angry.
Oh, look at Stephanie. Stephanie back. Yeah.
Is that
Appreciate
it?
that,
God
Stephanie.
save me.
Save me from being angry.
Say it again, Stephanie.
God save me from being angry.
God save me from being angry. God save me from being angry. God save me from being angry. God save me from being angry. I'll say that over and over and over and over. Okay. When we talk about the step 4 fear prayer, again, guys, I don't leave home without this. God, please remove my fear and direct my attention towards what you would have me be. Okay. And what would God have us be? Love and service, baby. Love and service. All right. Simply, God's going to have us be of love and service. Okay. And why service in particular? Why is service such a powerful antidote? Because I'll tell you what, every time I say that prayer, God, please remove my fear and direct my attention towards what you would have me be. God would have me be of love and service. The next thing I need to do is go find someone else to go help. Okay. When I go find a sponsee, go find a newcomer to talk to and talk to them about them, it's amazing how when I come back to the fear, I can't even remember what I was afraid of anymore. Okay. Because I've gotten out of myself. I've gotten out of my head. When I'm thinking about you, I'm not thinking about me. And thinking about myself is the root of all of my problems. It's the root of all of my trouble. Okay. There's a fine line between what we call self-awareness, which is kind of a spiritual observation of how I'm behaving, and self-obsession. Can you guys understand, kind of the distinguishment between self-awareness and self-obsession? Okay. And the way that I overcome this self-obsession, one of the quickest ways that I can do it is by going to work with a newcomer, going to find someone to go help. So every time I say that prayer, God, please remove my fear and direct my attention towards what you would have me be, I know that what God would have us be are people who are of love and service to others. And I go find someone else to help to get me out of my head. Okay. I go to a treatment center, go to a panel at a hospital, whatever it is. When I am of service to you guys, I am not obsessed with my own fears. Okay. So that prayer is on page 68. And that is, guys, a prayer that I use all the time. God, please save me from being angry. Or sorry, not I use that one too. Not that one. God, please remove my fear and direct my attention towards what you would have me be. Okay. And so we'll talk more when we get to step 11 about all the other types of prayers. I've been using lately something that we call the golden key. And the golden key is also just a beautiful prayer, a beautiful concept given to us by a guy named Emmett Fox. And really, I mean, he just says, if you have a problem, if you will only stop thinking about the problem and instead think about God, the problem will disappear. Okay. And I used to hear stuff like that and just roll my eyes like, that might work for you, but I've got real problems. Okay. I have actual problems, and thinking about God is not going to solve them. And like so many things in AA, I was completely wrong. The golden key, when I will apply it, absolutely works. If I stop thinking about the problem and start thinking about God, the problem will go away. And it's really incredibly powerful. And we can talk more when we get to step 11. We'll talk more about what I mean when I say think about God. Okay, so we've said the prayer. Now we're going to move into column 4. And what it says, what we just read is perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis. The basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role he assigns. Right here, guys, this is the sentence. This is column 4 right here. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us, number one, and number two, humbly rely upon him, does he enable us to match calamity, which is column 2, with serenity, which is freedom and peace from fear. Okay. I am an alcoholic who is sober today, and I am sober because I have found in AA the exact same thing that I was always looking for in a bottle. I have found freedom from fear and a way to feel ease and comfort while I am sober. I have discovered a higher degree of mental comfort and an escape from the tortures of the mind, okay? And doing step 4 and applying this work is a big part of that. So when I do column 4 with my sponsees, this is what we do. How would trusting God and doing his will remove the fear? And when we do this, guys, there is a surface level and then what I like to say is that there is a deeper promise. The surface level is related to doing God's will. And the deeper promise is related to trusting God. Okay. So I understand if that seems or feels or sounds a little confusing right now. I promise you, guys, we're going to go through some examples right now, and more will be revealed. Okay. So let's take a common fear. Okay, let's say Kevin has a fear of rejection. Okay. Column 1. What am I afraid of? Rejection. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, we can put it in the chat. Column 1, rejection. Column 2, why am I afraid? Why am I afraid of rejection? Well, I've been rejected in the past. It hurts when people reject us, and I don't want to be alone. Okay, great. Column 3, how has self-reliance failed me in terms of rejection? Well, remember, guys, in column 3, we talked about I am the most drunken, drug-addicted, sick, selfish, dishonest, spiritually sick version of myself. Okay. When I am behaving and living that way, is it safe to say that people are going to reject me? Yes. And why? It's not even that they don't like me. It's just self-preservation at that point. Okay. Our book says an alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Okay. So me being sick and drunk and selfish is me relying on myself, and is more likely, would you agree, to end up with me being rejected by other people? Would you guys agree with that? Would you guys agree from your own lives that when you were drunk and you were an unlovely creature, that people were probably rejecting you as well? Is that safe to say, you guys? Okay, so we say the prayer, God, please remove my fear of rejection and direct my attention towards what you would have me be. What would God have us be? Love and service. Okay? And go love someone else, get into the program, do the steps, and go work with another newcomer. Go work with someone else. Okay? So now, how would trusting God and doing his will remove the fear? So at a surface level, if I'm in AA and I'm really doing God's will, what right out of the gate happens? Right out of the gate, what's the first main change that you're going to see? I'm sober. I'm physically sober. Okay. And in addition to being physically sober, I'm trying to do God's will. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to see what I can give to others instead of what I can take. I'm honest with people. Okay. And is it safe to say that me being that guy is more likely to relate in me not being rejected by people? Okay. Because I'm just being a better person just in general. Would you guys agree with that? Okay. So what if I'm still rejected though? What if I still get rejected by people? This is the deeper promise, okay? The deeper promise. And I always start this out, guys, with the words, even if. Even if. Even if I am rejected by people. The deeper promise of trusting God is that regardless of whether or not people like me or don't like me or want to be around me or don't want to be around me, I know that I can be okay. Because my well-being is no longer dependent upon the opinions of fallible human beings. My well-being is dependent upon my relationship with God. I am no longer a people pleaser. I am a God pleaser. Okay. I am here to do what he would have me do, and I serve him. Okay. And that regardless of whether people reject me or not, I know that I can be okay. Even if people reject me, I know that I will be okay. Okay. And at once we commence to outgrow fear. So number 1 in column 4, I'm being a better person. I'm sober. I'm honest. I'm trying to see what I can give to people. I'm thoughtful. I'm considerate. And probably I'm going to be more attractive to people. I don't mean physically attractive. I mean just attractive to people in general, because they see that we have something going on that they want to be a part of, because we are in the 4th dimension living with God. Okay. But the deeper promise is that then, even if I am rejected by other people, I will still be okay. And regardless of the opinions of other people, I know that I can be okay with God. And I know that I have a life of meaning and purpose, and I can go be of love and service to other people, regardless of the opinions of other people. Does that make sense, you guys? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, so that's one fear. Somebody unmute yourselves, and I know that none of you guys actually have any fears, but make one up. Pretend that you had a fear. Imagine that you had a fear, and lay one on me, and let's go through it. Let's go through 2 or 3 of these.
Here's a good one, Kevin. Fear of the language big book taking over.
Fear of the plain language big book taking over. Okay, so column 1. What am I afraid of? Fear of the plain language big book taking over. That's a good one, Marcus. Okay. Column 2. Why are you afraid of the plain language big book taking over?
Everybody relapses.
You're afraid of everybody relapsing. Okay. Any other reasons that you're afraid? Are you afraid of yourself relapsing, Marcus?
I recently did that. No, not. I guess, I mean, deep down, of course, that's always a fear. Yeah.
Well, listen, brother, what does tradition 1 say? Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. The plain language big book, my personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Plain language big book comes out, everybody gets drunk. I'll tell you what, man, that's a bad deal. That's a bad deal. AA does not exist. Neither does Kevin. That's a guarantee. Okay. Without AA, there is no Kevin. Okay. So how has self-reliance failed me in terms of this fear? How is me being and in this case, we won't look at drunk and drug addicted. Okay, but I'll just look at my own selfish, self-centered fears and all of that, kind of stuff. For me, if I was looking at why am I afraid of the plain language big book taking over, I am afraid of what's going to happen to me, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen to my home group, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen to my friends in AA, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen to my sponsees. Okay, and I am not trusting in God in that moment. I am trusting only in myself and what I think is best. And believe me, Marcus, I have this fear as well. I had a lot of fears about the plain language big book when it was first coming out. I was afraid, and they were all like intellectual fears. They were all just Kevin's opinion. and I was not trusting God. I was not trusting that God has a perfect plan, that God is absolutely in control at all times, that God is always good and always good is God. And just because I disagreed with something did not mean that his masterful hand was not at work and is not continuing to be at work the entire time. So that's how my self-reliance is failing me. My own intellectualism, my own opinions about these things are causing me to have this fear, okay? Whether I'm right or wrong about the big book is secondary. What we're trying to neutralize here is just the fear that I have about the plain language big book. So how will doing God's will and then trusting God remove the fear, okay? So first of all, if I'm doing God's will, the number one thing is that I, regardless of what happens with the plain language big book, ain't no one gonna take this book away from me.
Yeah.
And no matter what happens, even if they have, stormtroopers and police squads showing up at houses trying to steal the original copy of the big book, I will fight tooth and nail to make sure no one ever takes this away from me. And I will be sure that when I'm working with sponsees, we are working out of the real deal, man, not the plain language big book, okay? And then the deeper promise, in terms of everyone relapsing, is that, again, just what I was saying before, I have to trust God, and I have to trust that the group conscience of Alcoholics Anonymous knows better than Kevin, okay? And that's not easy to do because Kevin thinks he knows a lot, okay? But the group conscience of Alcoholics Anonymous, the divine intelligence of Alcoholics Anonymous in total knows the truth about that book better than I do. You know, I was listening to this great rabbi, this Jewish rabbi the other day talking about, people are talking to him about suffering, right? And why is there so much pain in the world? Why is there so much suffering and on and on? And what he said is, if you are looking at a building being built, we can only see things from our own perspective, our own very small, limited perspective. We cannot see the totality of the universe and everything that God sees and knows. That God knows all things for all time. He has complete omnipotence over everything. All I can see is my little corner of the world, and yet I think that I am God in this little corner of the world. And what's worse is that I start dictating to you what I think I'm seeing from my little tiny corner of the world. And when you're looking at a building being built, you might see some bricks over here and some dirt over here and some glass over there, and it may not look very good as you're looking at it in little pieces, but you come back and you see this magnificent structure that is built from all of these seemingly broken pieces, okay? And that's what I had to concede with the plain language big book, is that maybe I didn't know. Maybe I just didn't know. And that the group collective conscience of Alcoholics Anonymous was right and I was wrong. And I had to trust in that, but also with the understanding that I will always be doing what I believe is God's will for me, which is to continue carrying the message out of the real, I won't say the real, the original big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Does that help, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And I think that's a perfect example of what you just talked about a minute ago, the golden key, right? Taking my focus off that and then putting it onto God, right?
Amen. Amen. I love it. Okay, guys, we're almost at 7 o'clock. Let's do two more of these fears. Somebody else throw a fear at me.
Financial fear.
Oh, I love it, Richard. I was just going to say fear of financial insecurity. Beautiful. Okay, a lot of us have that. Thank you, Richard. Column 1, what am I afraid of? Financial insecurity. Column 2, why am I afraid of it? Well, because I don't like being broke, and really part of it is I want people to think well of me, and if I'm poor, maybe people won't think well of me, okay? Because my well-being depends upon what I think you think of me, okay? Notice that. My well-being depends on what I think you think of me, which is not necessarily, by the way, what you think of me. It's what I think you think of me. And that's even crazier. Okay. I don't want to be broke. I like, and the thing is, like, when I start to feel financially insecure, I don't imagine myself a little bit financially insecure. I imagine myself completely bankrupt living in my parents' basement again, right? I just go to the absolute extreme every time. It's not that my financial picture may change a little bit. It's like, it's all over. It's all done for. I told my mom one time, Mom, my biggest fear in my life is ending up living in your basement again. And she said to me, Kevin, my biggest fear.
Sorry, I forgot to mute myself.
That's okay. That's all right. Okay, so number 3, how has self-reliance failed me? Think about the most drunk, drug addicted, sick, selfish, self-centered version of Kevin you could possibly have. Okay, boom. Am I going to be financially insecure? You better believe it. If I'm drinking, there's no job, brothers and sisters. Let me tell you. And when I'm drinking, I burn it all to the ground, man. I don't stop until the bank account is empty. And even then, I will start stealing to get more. Okay, that's financial insecurity. That's real financial insecurity. Okay, so we say a prayer. God, please remove my fear of financial insecurity and direct my attention towards what you would have me be. Then, how would doing God's will and fully trusting on God remove the fear? Number 1, doing God's will. I'm sober. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make better decisions. I'm going to review financial decisions that I have, perhaps with my sponsor and others. Okay. I'm going to let other people listen to my brilliant plans and schemes about financial well-being. Okay. I'm going to make sane, sober, emotionally sober decisions financially. I'm going to work hard. And I believe that I'm going to be financially more secure. Okay. That's the surface level. Probably if I'm sober and doing God's will, I'm going to be in a much better financial position. But the deeper promise, guys, is that even if I experience financial insecurity, I can live a life of meaning and purpose and joy and serenity, living in God's will. Trusting God, fully trusting God, and understanding that my real wealth is not in my bank account. My real wealth comes from God. That anything I can hold in the palm of my hand has no real value in God's world. As Johnny Harris says, I got my real storehouse in my Father's treasure chest. The things of the Spirit that cannot be bought and sold. And I'll tell you what, guys, every night, I've been practicing this for a long time. I make a gratitude list of the things in my life that I'm grateful for. And what never ceases to amaze me is that nothing on that list is material. I'm not, when I feel gratitude at the end of the night, it's not, I'm grateful for my bank account, and I'm grateful for my car, and I'm grateful for my watch, and I'm grateful for any of that. The things in my life that I'm grateful for are you. The things in my life I'm grateful for are my friends and my family and the connections that I've made with newcomers and my relationship with God. Those are the things that I feel grateful for. And I'm just thinking about this. I'm realizing it as I'm telling you guys this, that my gratitude list is never about material things. Okay. And that's the deeper promise when I start to live truly in God's will. All right. Okay, guys, let's do one more and then we'll shut it down for tonight. Okay. Anyone else? Throw out one fear for me.
I'm not important enough. Is that okay? I didn't raise my hand. Should I raise my hand?
Fine, Stephanie. Yeah. Okay. So column 1, what's the fear? I'm afraid that I'm not important enough. Okay.
Mhm.
Not important enough. Column 2, Stephanie, can you tell me, why do you feel you're not important enough? Or rather, why are you afraid of not being
Yeah.
important?
I'm afraid because then I'm alone. They don't value. Why do I feel that? Because I'm not valued enough. I don't have value in that person's life. That's why I'm not important to them.
Sure. I get it. Okay. Are you ready to hear some hard truths, Stephanie?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to give some to you. Okay. So column 3, how has self-reliance failed me? So first of all, if I'm drunk and selfish and self-centered and taking and using people and lying and so on and so forth, yeah, I'm not going to be important in people's lives. Okay, they're not going to. I'm not going to. They're not going to make me a priority at all. And then the other thing is that there's a great line in the step 11 prayer. God grant that I may seek to understand rather than to be understood, to comfort rather than to be comforted, and to love rather than to be loved. Okay. And my whole problem, my whole life, what I was trying to do is get you to love me. I need you all to love me. And that's not what Francis says it's about, man. What is it about? It's about me making you important. It's about me loving you, not trying to, my grand sponsor Clancy says it. All I ask if I'm in a relationship with you is that you treat me special all the time. Okay. Just treat me special all the time, because if you treat me average, I feel less than. Okay. If you treat me special, I'll feel okay. All right. And that is selfishness and self-centeredness in the extreme. That is how self-reliance is failing me. Okay. Now we say the prayer. God, please remove my fear of not feeling important enough and direct my attention towards what you would have me be. Then, how would doing God's will and fully trusting God remove the fear? Number 1, I'm doing God's will. Stephanie, what we just talked about. Okay. I'm not trying to see what I can get from other people. I'm trying to see what I can give to other people. I'm not trying to see how I can be understood. Isn't that the battle cry of every alcoholic? Why don't you understand me? Nobody understands me. Isn't that what we say? Look at all the laughter. Isn't that what we say? And the reality is what I need to do is to seek to understand you. I don't need to love, to be loved by you. There's not enough love in the world from human beings. One of my sponsors used to say they could have a party for me with 1,000 people in it. It would never be enough. Never enough. The ego cannot be satiated. There's not enough importance. There's not enough phone calls or text messages that people could send me and likes on my Facebook post. It's a my ego, any human ego, is an absolute bottomless pit. There is one thing that will satisfy the alcoholic ego. There is one thing that will wipe it out and make it irrelevant, and that is the power of God. That is the only thing. And when I begin to serve God and trust God and love God, rather than trying to be loved by God, what ought I to do? What's one of the first, we talk about those 10 commandments. Love God, love others, love other people. And it begins to radiate. And suddenly I've got all these people in my life and I'm thinking about them and I'm thinking about how they're important to me. Not how can I be important to them, okay? And no one can take that away from me. If I am making other people the focal point of my life and I'm loving other people and I'm seeing how I can be of love and service to them and understand them and comfort them and be there for them, no one can take that away from me ever, okay? And Stephanie, even if I begin to feel that I'm not important in the lives of, say, my family, for example, the deeper promise is that I am always important to God. Okay? I am always important to God. I believe that God loves me today. And that's been a work in progress. That's been a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. You guys want to hear something cool? I learned this the other day. The word individual, one person, actually means undivided, individed, okay? It means undivided. You know what that means? It means that although God can express himself in me as an individual, and God is within me, surely as he is within every living creature, he is individualized within us, and yet God is completely undivided. God is not divided amongst us. God is unified always, but in this individual, he is undivided. And God is with all of us, through us, between us forever. And I don't know about you, Stephanie, but that makes me feel pretty important. And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing at a more practical level. In Alcoholics Anonymous, Stephanie, you are always important in Alcoholics Anonymous. In fact, I would like everyone on the call right now, raise your hand if Stephanie is important to you right now. Especially because I know 3 weeks, Stephanie, we know 21 days today. You're back. We love you, love you, love you. Okay, 3 weeks in a row. It's incredible. Okay, and it's the same for all of us. It's the same for everyone here. If my family of origin is, you know, and things happen and maybe we can't get back and we can't make those amends and it's not time yet. I have a new family. I have a new family in Alcoholics Anonymous. My relationship with my family of origin is much better, but the reality is I have a new family, and in Alcoholics Anonymous and to God, you are always important, Stephanie. And that is the deeper promise. That's the deeper promise that God gives us. And at once we commence to outgrow fear. We commence to outgrow fear. Okay. Okay, guys. Well,